Jeremy Putman here again, and I've got lots of unusual questions for him, and he has no idea what these questions are. So how have you been since last time we spoke a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I've
3 weeks
been
ago.
doing okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, yeah. I'm doing okay. I've just had, I think, a technical hitch. I can't. The video has stopped
Has
working.
it?
So you've frozen and I've frozen. So I can't. I can hear you okay. Can you see me? Can you see the
Um,
video? Is it working
I
at your
I
end?
can see you. You're moving. You're yeah.
How
I
strange.
I'm moving. I've no idea. But it
Well, I'll carry on talking anyway. I can only hear you at the moment, but that might just be enough. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it's been super busy, super strange at the same time. Everything seems like it takes twice as long to do because you're doing it remotely, and you can get so much more stuff done when you're with people and meeting with people. And I just probably I'm feeling probably what everybody else is feeling in this state, where you just want to reach out, you just want to spend time with other human beings. Instead of being in front of a computer screen. So, in some ways, I found it quite challenging that remote living, as it has been for the last few weeks and months. But I appreciate that there is a huge degree of challenge and difficulty that many others are finding, and I'm in a very fortunate situation given where I am and having a family at home and having a garden that I can step out into. Um, Other people's experiences are very different. Uh, but the church, yeah, the church is going okay. The work that's going on in the building is happening, and we're continuing to help people. And Food Bank have been working really hard. Children's Clothes Bank are about to start a click and collect service for local families
yeah.
from the building this week. And the financial crisis stuff has been carrying on remotely. So all of that's just been fantastic to keep to to see it do its work and help people at this very difficult time. How have you been doing over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. I'm in this um in between this state of like kind of enjoying it, but really missing human interaction.
Yeah.
I'm lucky during the whole of this. I've had interaction with my carers. They've come in and got
Hmm.
me out of bed. And I really thought
Mm.
about it the other day. I see my dad for the first time in ages, and it really made me realize that in all of this, there is people that haven't seen anybody,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
for 3 months. And when I went out for a walk the other day, it's amazing how our skills of social interaction disappear quite quickly. It's almost weird. It's like, what do you say? What do you look at them? Do you? It's kind of really weird where we just used to go out amongst people and never think anything of it.
Mm.
Do you? While I say hello to a few people,
Yeah.
do you want to refresh your screen and give it
Yeah.
another
Yeah. I can do
try?
that. Yeah. 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 I'll give it a go. Yeah. Yeah. It's really odd, but should get it fixed. Let's have a go.
Hopefully it'll work.
Yeah.
Hi Sherry, hi Kate, and Sherry on YouTube as well. Uh, Judy's here. Says nice to see you both. Dolores. So
Ah,
if anybody's got any questions for
I can
Jeremy,
see you now, Steve. This is great. This is so much better. Yeah.
it's easier, isn't it?
That's brilliant. Excellent. Let me just give you a quick introduction to somebody else that's with me at the moment. Can you see
I
Taran?
can.
Here we go. This is Taran. He's
Hello.
it's probably a bit difficult to kind of pick up the definition. He's a lovely black fluffy Portuguese water dog. So
Oh,
yeah, he's with me at the moment as well.
how old is he?
He's 1 year old. He was 1 year a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Um, I have got some questions for you. But you were saying about just before you refreshed. Yeah, the amount of people that haven't seen anybody at all. Nope, that's my book. I was writing a bit of my book this morning, doing really well.
Mm.
I've lost my questions for you. In all the getting everything working. Right, here they are. Right. Before we go to the
You're going to
questions.
grill me, are you, Steve?
Oh, no. I thought about it. I was reading through the questions thinking, oh, that would be like an interrogation, all those questions. And I thought about calling the Zoom call, getting to know Jeremy Putman. And I thought, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. So what if we call this Zoom call? It's is the world beyond repair? Simple little question like that. And I'm just looking out at the moment, and we're just in this bizarre time when it's exposing humans for what we are really essentially. You know, we've built a world on economics. We built a world and our whole social pattern on those kind of things in pubs and restaurants and things like that. And we're losing connections. Meanwhile, the virus is going up everywhere. It's exactly what they said. It would be a second wave. And it just, I'm like, 3 months ago, I was terrified. And it was barely even hitting Cornwall. Whereas now, I'm not so frightened. But yet, it's more around everywhere than what it was 3 months ago. Isn't it weird how humans have this inbuilt, I don't know if you find this, but we have this way of, when things get really tough, we get used to it. And that becomes the new okay. When we have bad news, then we start to live with it. And someone says to us 3 weeks later, how are you doing? It's like, no, we're doing okay. Yet your life hasn't improved. But suddenly we're living with it now.
I think some of that is to do with the natural tendency to try and find coping mechanisms when things are so different, which is a good thing. I mean, those things help protect us, don't they? They help us survive through difficult times. But it's kind of having the awareness, the ability to self-reflect and know that actually progress and change and growth happens with a degree of discomfort as well, that we have to move beyond the coping to being alive. Life isn't just about surviving, it's about growing and embracing and flourishing. And sometimes it can be really difficult to get to that place because of how it feels. Like you expressed really well, you can look out into the world at the moment, and there's so much hurt, there's so much suffering, there's so much conflict, there's so much in the way of disagreement and discord. And on our news screens, aren't they? Our TV screens, news broadcasts are just filled with discontent, political rhetoric, power struggles. So it's being able to find a way in which we can center ourselves in a place of peace and growth and flourishing, even in the midst of all of that going on. One of the stories that comes to mind for me is the very well-known story of Jesus calming the storm. When his friends were up on deck on the boat, Jesus was asleep under the deck and the storm was raging. And so even in the midst of all of that going on, he found some rest, he found peace. And then when he came up, being called by his friends to do something to save them, he just with his voice calms the storm. And that kind of helps me, reminds me that it's really important to talk about how we're feeling, that our words can calm the storm by just sharing the way we feel with others. And sometimes a lot of healing can take place, can't it, when you hear yourself talk about how you feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It reminds me of when I sit in meditation. There seems to be, you sit and you pay attention to your breath, or in prayer, or when you're reading, because I was reading a bit of Thomas Merton, and he was
Oh,
saying about the
yeah,
real prayer is the reading, not so much the sitting afterwards.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and there's like a drop,
mm,
and that drop where everything suddenly becomes quieter. But of course, nothing's quieter. It's
no,
Jesus never calmed the storm. It just
mm,
calmed the way we see the storm and the way we feel the storm. And it's that perception, because everything that is happening out there is really been experienced inside.
mm,
So it's how we experience it. How
yeah,
can some people be in the storm and still feel calm, and other people, at certain times in their life, the slightest thing happen and that's it. And I've been
yeah,
there. Know,
yeah,
any little ripple, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? On the other
yeah,
hand, now it's like, okay, let's take a breath, and it
yeah,
just quietens it down.
mm, mm,
Uh,
mm,
but it's not trying to change out there. But the
mm.
other thing is, if we do that, does it make it okay for the world to keep burning?
That's a good question. Yeah,
You know, do we sit back and watch the fire and go, it's okay? We're getting
right.
used to the heat off the fire.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you know that I've always got something to say about a given situation, out
That's
out
why
in the
you're
world,
here.
and you're not so different yourself. I mean, the way you conduct yourself and the way you lead meditations and your community shows a deep concern and care for the world around us. You wouldn't be doing it otherwise. Um, we know that when we deal with those things within ourselves, I think this is what you teach. This is what I receive anyway. When you deal with those conflicts, the storm within ourselves, and you find peace within oneself, then we are far more likely to see those things in the world around us as well. How can we expect the world to change if we ourselves are not changed? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
So,
can we
so that
approach it from a place of something that's going to help rather than keep burning it?
right. So I think for me is when you get to a place where you're willing to address those things within yourself, and that to know it is not just something that we perceive and observe in the world, that actually those things are within our own capability and within our own being, then um, then I think that when you do start to address those things, then it gives you, I think it gives you the, I'm trying to find the right word, not the credibility, but I think the platform and the confidence to speak against those things in the world. It comes from a
Yeah.
place of humility, I think, to begin with, when you're willing to address them for yourselves and for yourself, and then address what is going on around the world. Bear with me 1 second. My daughter's just come back, and can you just see that Tara and the point? He's
Oh yeah,
wanting to go and see her, so
that's
I'm
it.
just going to open the
You're
door.
second best now.
Okay. All right, Taryn, hang on.
Kate says
Bear
it's
with
scary. It's scary in Canada. Huge chains have been closing us. But see, that's the other thing is in all of this second wave and in all of these different things, there's all the fears of when the businesses reopen, they're hoping for this really, they need
me.
this massive bounce back.
Mm,
And if there's a trickle of the second wave, there's just no bounce back, and there's no. So, interesting times ahead.
mm, yeah. But in in
Uh,
a in a odd way, it's kind of not the virus that I'm most frightened of at the moment. I mean, it is frightening, and it is killing people, and it is awful and horrendous, and there's been so much loss and so much, uh, so much has gone as a result of it. But the thing that really frightens me is in the midst of that, the way people can still treat each other. That there's been examples over the last few weeks um, of a great deal of discontent and division So we saw the issues around race, for instance,
Yeah.
emerge. Um, and I think if we can treat each other like that in the midst of a pandemic where people are dying in their thousands, what does that say? You know, um, and so that's the bit that kind of frightens me most, really,
Yeah.
is
But
the human
isn't that
capacity
what it is, though? It's fear. It's
yeah, exactly, yeah,
it, well, if something triggers us, it's because we care about something deeply,
yeah,
and we fear what that's going to take away or what that's going to lose. And whether they're protesting the Black Lives Matter because they fear how they're been treated. They're
mm,
pro and every protest is because through fear.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and this racism is huge. I recorded a podcast about racism 2 days ago, and halfway through the podcast, I took my headphones off and I put it down and I deleted it because I just sat there
right.
and said, I am so not qualified to do this.
Oh,
Um,
Steve.
and
Oh,
and the reason why I did, and what I was trying to get over the protests is, we hear this statement that racists don't know they're racist. And it's a statement that I've thrown out many times without realizing the ignorance of it. And I believe there's some truth in everything. And I don't believe the world's innately racist. And I don't believe anybody really is. And this is why it cannot be fixed by pointing the finger at racism. I believe people fear differences. They
mm,
fear what they've built is going to be taken away. They fear different cultures. They fear a difference to them. Now then, if I if I wrote this on Facebook, what I'm about to say, a number of people would call me racist. But
mm,
if I was invited to an island and I had to pick 100 people to spend the rest of my life on that island with, I would pick people of my group, my culture,
mm,
people I fit in with, the people I feel comfortable with.
mm,
Now then,
mm,
in a world of sensitivity, that becomes racist. But it's not. It's human to find comfort in your tribe. But
mm,
that doesn't mean
mm,
you're racist.
mm,
And
mm,
and therein lies the difficulty when someone expresses fear of um, complete. I don't want to say equality because I agree with equality, but complete integration.
yeah,
I I would love to have that one day,
mm, mm,
but I don't know enough about other religions, about other
mm,
cultures, to be able to go and sit amongst them and feel as comfortable as I would with my family.
mm,
But
mm.
that doesn't make me a racist.
No,
But in
no.
this world of too much information, that can be seen as. And I think that's
Mm.
where a lot of people are. Um,
I yeah, I think people are quick to judge the words and not the heart, and I think we're all sort of guilty of that at times. It's very easy. I don't know whether I said this last time, but it's very easy for us to judge someone's behavior or their words and the way they are, and not their intention, their heart. But when we look at ourselves, we only ever judge our intention and our heart and not our words. So we might say something, we think, oh, I wish I'd worded that better.
yeah,
And you give yourself some grace because you know actually what you really meant, you know.
yeah,
But when it comes to other people, we find it very difficult to go that, to go under the skin, to go into that place of intent and where the heart is. And that gets played out all the time, and it's getting played out in this conversation about race, definitely. And what you've described is a really good example of that, because your heart is that to love all people, to know that
yeah,
everyone is made equally, and we should treat each other's equally, and that there is the familial kind of innate association you might have with a particular group of people.
Yeah.
Interestingly, that group of people might not necessarily be ethnically the same. That's the thing, you know.
Yeah.
So it may not necessarily be um, skin color that is the markation of that group. It could be something entirely different. But you're right, we are drawn to groups and communities. I think one of the things that I've learned over the last few weeks with regards to the race conversation is that I now understand, I think, in my mind, that racism is um, quite often judged as being an incident or an event. So a swastika on a memorial or an overt act of hatred and racism towards somebody. And when you only think of racism as an event like that, as something that an individual does, an individual that is conscious of their racism and are intentional about their racism, then then when we talk about racism at a personal level, about what I do or how I see the world, then I'm only ever going to get defensive
Yeah.
because I understand myself not to be racist. But if we consider racism as an environment, as a system, as often some people say it, that we've been nurtured and brought up in, then the guilt is laid upon the environment, not upon the individual, and that we can collectively work together to try and dismantle that and make it a better system and a better environment. And that's not just the case for racism. It's about issues of poverty and deprivation. It's about discrimination to do, you know, around disability or gender. It's about all sorts of different aspects of our common life together. That will, when we disassociate ourselves away from from the incident, from the event, the individual, and think of it as an environmental issue, then we can get some work done. But a lot of the conflict and the hostility is all directed towards you pull down that statue, or you made a racist statement last week or whatever. It's all about the individual. It's never really about the system, and that's
Yeah.
the conversation that we have to have, I think.
It's that you've really made me think about the difference between the individual action and the system, because of course the system doesn't have a moral stance. The system
Right.
isn't a mind in itself, and I disagree in part. I think we do blame the system because we think it's systematic in the system sometimes,
Yeah.
and and but we also focus it so on the act
Yeah.
of the individual, and of course I think you're right about it's just like let's talk about love or racism. You know, love on one hand is a feeling, and someone will say that's a feeling, nothing more, nothing less. It's just a feeling of comfort, nice, whatever you want to depict
Yeah.
it. Someone else will say no, love is an action, love is something you do.
Hmm.
So if we cannot agree on something
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
beautiful as love,
Yeah.
racism is the same. Is racism a feeling, or is it
Yeah.
an ignorant action? Is
Mm.
it you know? And we all have prejudices.
Mm.
Um,
No, I mean, that's true. I mean, I've been really trying to engage with my own sort of unconscious biases that I have in my own life. Um, you know, I know myself to be I'm more likely to have a better education, more likely to have my own home. I'm more likely to um, live in a safer community, um, and have a better job, all because of the color of my skin.
yeah,
That's statistically a fact that those things are, from the day I was born, more available to me than they would be to somebody from a black and Asian minority ethnic community. And so I've started to think about, okay, well, how does those things, how have they played out in my life? And that's not to dismiss that there are many white families that struggle with poverty and struggle with life and profoundly struggle. It's just saying that I'm aware that within my current context, within this country, it's more likely that a white person would do better than a black person economically
Yeah.
and socially. Um, and,
And
and and so once I recognise that, I got to think, okay, well, what do I want to do about that? Um, and I feel I want to do something about it, but I'm not sure what I can do about it. And that's my frame of mind at the moment, is discovering what difference I can make to that.
yeah.
And like I said, it's the same question around uh, other issues, social issues, like gender, sexuality, and disability as well. I mean, you must find in your work as well, in terms of your public service, um, these are issues that come up from time to time. They're matters that crop up on the agenda at town council, I guess.
Yeah, they do. I had a beautiful message yesterday, which I never seen. I did a live the other day about being able to sleep better, and I said
Mm,
about airing your room and light and dark, making all this. And somebody messaged me yesterday and said that it made them think, and it made them think about how privileged we are to be able to do those things. What about the people that share rooms? What about people that don't have the privilege of being able to cool the room down with windows and fans and money and things like that? And I never seen that. So I did my
mm,
teaching based on my life. And I
mm,
never considered white privilege until the last few years. And do I sit here and think that I am overly white privileged? But collectively, yes, subtly in my life, just the fact that I was born in this place in the world
yeah,
gives me a privilege over 98% of the world. I
yeah,
have an
yeah,
advantage.
yeah,
Just that simple act.
yeah.
And I hear this proud to be, it's going to be controversial now, proud to be Cornish or proud to be American, proud to be. And my question is,
Quick,
what
cut the
do
feed.
what did you do to achieve that? What entrance exam did you have to qualify for that? And proud to be what you achieve or what you do, but it's like saying I'm proud to be white.
Mm, mm,
In a similar sense. I don't think they realize it in that way, and I don't think it's said in that way.
mm.
But I did nothing to become who I
Well,
am
none of us, yeah,
the moment I
none
was
of us
born.
use our skin color. No, that's right. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's a really, really important point. Be- and I think it just emphasizes the uncomfortableness that I feel around words that people are shouting at each other often, um, and how much pain that they can cause sometimes. Um, I'm very aware that I've not ever been aware of my whiteness until recently. Um, I've never been racially assessed because of the color of my skin.
Yeah,
Whereas I know that there are, black friends and Asian friends of mine will be reminded of that every single day. They're out and about. There'll be a look or a subtle comment or an assumption made in a meeting, or um, something will remind them that they are black, or that they're Asian, because of the way people are around them.
yeah.
And I'm never aware of that. I'm never aware of somebody racially assessing me or making assumptions based on the color of my skin. Um,
I was very unaware of the people that look at me based on me being in a wheelchair. I went in town with a
yeah,
friend of mine. We had two wheelchairs. Well, I had one, and he wasn't in a wheelchair, but he went downtown. As far we were about 25 or something, and he went downtown in the other electric wheelchair, and it was just fun. Oh, it's such a funny day. And he said to me, "Do you know what? Everyone's looking at me." I'm like, "No, they're not." And for the next few days, him bringing that awareness into my mind, I was like, "Oh, people do actually."
yeah,
I just never realized it. And,
yeah,
and then my narcissist come in. It's like, oh, I've arrived in the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was there too. But I was just unaware of it. And like you said, I was so unaware of how my skin color affected my life.
Yeah.
I was so blinkered on what, and this hashtag, just before we move on to another subject, this hashtag, the Black Lives Matter, I keep thinking about, well, when I walked into, because I was thinking, how can I understand why the hashtag is important to them? Because it's not about me, the hashtag, it's about them. And I thought about when I used to go into social services meetings about my care. Then I've been in meetings with social services when there's been like 6 or 7 of them the other side. And I've been here with an advocate and somebody else going to a meeting. And if hashtags existed, I would have gone in and printed out a 3D one and but disabled lives matter. Because I didn't think my life mattered to them. I thought their budget mattered to them. Their targets mattered to them. So I tried to put myself in that. Where in my life did I feel I did not matter? And it doesn't matter whether or not they do matter or not. It's how they feel is the important thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and everybody in that room could have told me that I mattered, that I was this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. How do I feel? Listen to me, listen to them. That's the...
Yeah. Yeah.
And we got lots of comments.
Yeah, I can't see them, so you'll have to share some of them.
It's going back a bit earlier. Words can calm the storm, Jeremy Putman, Kate said. Jesus calms the storm within us. Absolutely. Sarah, the valley takes us to the next glorious mountain. I like that. Wow, we are all saying, wow, you are all saying pretty powerful statement. And everybody on the comments has so much been said. Farrell says, I thought it was a toy train chugging along, but it was a dog panting. No, I think someone was sawing a bench or something next door as well at some point. Sherry says, racism is all over the world and I don't think it will ever end. So sad. I think fear and prejudiceness of some kind. Prejudiceness? It is a word now anyway.
Yeah, well, I've made a note of it. I'll use it again at some point.
Yeah, well, as long as it's used twice, I think we can get hold of the Oxford.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, in 300 years' time, it was used first between Joe. Moving from our heads to our hearts, absolutely. The tribe, you are comfortable with all the different color skin, religious and social, economical situations. Yeah, it's weird because I don't know whether I'm comfortable with them because I haven't spent no time with them. And I'm not talking color. I'm not talking religion. I haven't.
Just outside of your tribe.
Yeah. And we're living in a world today. We didn't have to. This leads me on to the next question, actually. What's something that overwhelms you? And really, that question, I get overwhelmed quite a lot. And I think we're living in a world today where the world is incredibly small regards to we can travel anywhere at any given 24 hours. We can mix with any cultures. We can experience any food. We have more information at our fingertips in front of our eyes than ever before.
Yeah.
And for millions of years, we only had to deal with the guys in the village. You know, if someone else come to a village, they were, no, stand out the side. We'll have a meeting to how we're going to bring this in. And whereas now we're growing up in a world, or we're living in a world where what overwhelms you?
My first go-to was just the awesomeness of creation. That's the first thing that overwhelms me every time I think about it. I'm a dust particle, not even a dust particle, compared to the awesomeness and the vastness of space and the universe. And and to kind of get a sense of that in a real way when I'm out in God's creation, the beach, on a hillside, or by a river, in the kindness of a stranger. It overwhelms me in a good way.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And then I don't know where I want to go with that, really. Just a feeling.
We don't have to. We don't have to.
No.
It reminds me of when I go out and walk the dog, and there's one particular place where I was walking the dog last year, and I often think about this, but I turned around, I was looking at the stars, and I was just thinking that photon that's just kamikazed in the back of my eye, that's been traveling for the last 3 billion years across this universe,
Yeah.
has sacrificed itself in the back of my eye so I could see that star right now, this moment.
Yeah.
And just to look back and witness these, Carl Sagan said, and this is what just brings me back to grounding every time, grounding or everything, I'm not sure which. But Carl Sagan said, to the words, the effect of, we are, what's he said? I don't want to butcher them completely, but he said, we are the, it's totally gone. We are the
little universe.
Sorry?
We are each of us a little universe.
No. We are consciousness is the universe being able to witness itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see why I kind of have to think about that one.
Yeah, I'm going to need some time to process that.
Yeah. But yeah,
that's good.
The universe would not know it exists unless we're here to look back at it.
Yeah. There's a great little reflection by C.S. Lewis. You can find it on the internet. Actually, it's not. I've not found it in his books, but it's called Meditation in a Tool Shed, and he has this moment where he reflects on stepping into his garden shed, and as he steps through the threshold and into this very, very dark shed, there is a crack in one of the side panels with a light that's shining through and into the darkness from the outside. And as he approaches this beam of light, he sees within it the dance of the dust particles, like they're planets and stars in a universe. And he's captivated by the beauty of this beam of light shining into his garden shed. And so
Welcome back.
He approaches. Sorry, the dog's just come through the door. I'm retelling a C.S. Lewis meditation. He's just come through the door. Taryn, out you go, buddy. Out you go. Oh, he's come to see me. Anyway, so C.S. Lewis, he sees this beam of light and the dance of particles, and he approaches this beam of light, and then he decides to step into the light and allow the beam to fall on his eyes, and he looks up and out through the beam and out into the world beyond the shed, and he can see the sunlight shining through the branches and the leaves of the trees outside. And he writes this reflection because it reminds him of, well, just the awesomeness of creation, that we are so conditioned and accustomed to the shed, the world, and we're captivated by such beauty, but one day we'll be able to allow the beam to fall on our eyes and look beyond. So that overwhelming feeling about the size of the universe is amplified even more by the thought that there is so much that we can't even perceive or even grasp or can even begin to imagine beyond the shed.
It reminds me of Richard Rohr when he was saying in one of his books, he was saying, when you meditate enough, or when you spend enough time looking within, suddenly you look to the amazingness of everything. and he said he was in he was in the supermarket one day, and he got to the washing powder aisle, and he just stood there in complete amazement, just like how many, and just like the magic of these boxes and these particles, and the way they're all just us, and they're all different, and they all smell differently. And he said that they must have thought it was crackers. He stood there 10 minutes just looking at these. If anybody said anything, he was trying to make a decision. But but just you get those moments of, wow, really, how can a caterpillar become a butterfly? Just contemplate that for just like a month, because you still won't work it out.
No.
How can one animal turn into another animal? And the other thing, the other day, I was looking at my tomato plants, and you got these baby tomato seeds, and in that tomato seed has all of the knowledge to weather, all kinds of weather, all kinds of insects, all kinds of, to know exactly what to do and how to grow a plant and the tomatoes, and to keep going, how to use the sun, how to, all in that seed.
All in that. Yeah. Steve, I'm just going to move the dog outside because he's now eating through one of my book boxes. Okay, I'm sorry this is so disruptive of our talk. Taryn, come on, buddy, let's go. Out you go.
Let's go to the comments a minute.
That's better.
Well, I believe both are not innate, aren't they learned? Love and racism. Kate says, yeah, I believe they're both learned. Even love, I believe, is learned to a degree. Jesus said, freely you have received, freely give. I like that.
I've just spotted one comment from Clint. The glorification of busy in today's world overwhelms me too. Yeah, I think that's a point really worth emphasizing. It's one of the things I mentioned last time about the three things that that we traditionally form to use our to form our identity. The sense of I am what I do, I am what I own, and I am what I can control. And what I do is a huge part of it. If we're busy, it fuels that side of our identity. And of course, I was saying that those three things are lies. That's not what makes us who we are. It's that knowing ourselves beloved that is the true inner identity.
I had some interference then. I'm not sure it was your end or my end.
No, it could have been my end. It could have been the dog barking. I'm so sorry.
What's the most memorable lesson you learned from your grandparents?
Well, there's a story in itself, really, because I didn't ever know my grandparents on my father's side. My grandfather on my father's side had died before I was born, and my grandmother on my father's side disconnected herself and the rest of the family from my family. My father was basically exiled from the family when he decided to get married to my mother. So my father came from farming background. My mother was in the city and worked for Clark. So mother and father decided they wanted to get married.
Have you got a mobile phone near your?
Possibly. Let me. Does that span interference then?
It might have been. You might have got a text message.
Yeah. Sorry. Did you miss any of that?
We probably missed the last about 20 seconds.
Yeah, no. So when my mother and father decided to get married and get engaged, my father's family cut him off because they came from very different worlds. and so I never got to see my grandmother on his side, and my grandfather and grandmother on my mother's side. My grandfather was a step grandfather. My real grandfather, my biological grandfather on my mother's side, I only found out who he was last year.
Right.
And it turns, shall I share a little bit more about this? This is,
Oh, please carry on. I'm just trying to map this for a moment,
I know, I know, I know. It is
visually
complicated.
in my mind.
So my grandfather on my mother's side was a New Zealand serviceman who came over to England during the Second World War, and I'm talking about obviously my biological grandfather, and uh, he actually got married to my grandmother, and then they had a child together, my mother, and then he returned to New Zealand, and it turned out that he already had a family. So it was all obviously the marriage in England was brought to an end and annulled, and it was a source of shame for my family for quite a number of years, and I wasn't told about it. Growing up, I was kept from it all, and it was only recently, before my mother died last year, that I learned a little bit more about it. Anyway, I did DNA thing online last year, and it matched me with somebody in New Zealand, and I thought,
Right.
wow, I wonder whether this is connected to my family over there. And sure enough, after a few emails, um, I learned that I had four uncles and an auntie I never knew I had, and a whole bunch of cousins. And I learned who my biological grandfather was. And interestingly, my DNA said that um, I had Polynesian blood, DNA basically in me. But my biological grandfather wasn't himself Polynesian. He was Western European. Um,
Right.
so I asked a bit further about that, and it turns out that his father married a Maori woman. Um, they said that she was a Maori princess, and there was a trade done over a sawmill. Uh,
Oh,
um, so in the last 12 months, I've learned an enormous amount about my own heritage and my own family. Um,
that's a lesson
so
in itself, isn't it?
which is a lesson in itself. Yeah,
Yeah.
about my roots, my roots. Yeah, so that's really interesting. But both my mother and father are both died now. So my mother died last year. She she'd been working in Israel, in Jerusalem, for the last 8 years for an organization that taught Christian and Jewish studies and worked across faith groups. Um, to help communities kind of deal with the differences between faith. And she lived just outside of the old city in Jerusalem. Um,
Farrell
and
says,
I,
did
yeah,
your
go,
New Zealand family welcome you?
yeah. So in fact, this is the really, really strange thing. Sorry, go back to that. Is when I got in contact with them. This was in the autumn last year. Um, I, I sent an email to one of the uncles that I learned I had, who had actually moved to Canada, and I said it'd be great to get in touch with you to hear more about your family and mine, and I can tell you about my family. And he said, "Oh, just uh, just so happens that our two sons live in London, and we're coming to visit in December. And not only that, they had literally planned a holiday to St Ives in Cornwall.
Oh, how cool.
So we met up on Boxing Day,
Is that
which
this year or
just
last year?
so yeah, Chris, yeah, this one just gone, yeah."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's absolutely incredible. To think that all of that happened in the space of 6 months since my mother passed away, and when I made contact with this uncle and auntie, they had already planned to come to Cornwall. So, and they're just wonderful. And their sons are really lovely, and we took a walk on Perranporth Beach, and spent an afternoon together before they had to go back on Boxing Day. So that was a big deal last year for me, especially in a year where when we lost my mother. So
So when are you going to New Zealand?
yeah, well, so it costs a lot of money, doesn't it, Steve?
Yeah. Yeah. We
Yeah,
just
I don't think it'll go anytime soon. I'd love
not
to.
probably not this year.
No,
Yeah.
no, probably not this year. No.
My family haven't got any story like that. I don't think so. Anyway, not going back far enough.
Yeah.
D- um.
We sorry, I was gonna say we had a really interesting time dealing with my mother's funeral service over in Israel and Jerusalem, because I got the call at the beginning of the year that she'd passed away, and it was very sudden. We weren't expecting her to be rushed off to hospital and then die in Jerusalem. I got a phone call from a friend of hers, and we had this extraordinary experience of immediately dropping everything and going to Jerusalem. Never been there before. Being picked up from the airport by a 90-year-old nun who
Right.
drove like a maniac around Jerusalem. I mean, I've never prayed so much in my life in the space of 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I was gripping everything. It was it was frightening. But we got to my mum's place in Jerusalem safely, thank God. But it was incredible because I learned very quickly about the Orthodox Jewish faith. I knew obviously from a biblical perspective what
Yeah.
those things mean, but what it means for people today was something I wasn't really aware of in real terms. And so, just by simply going to the hospital, which my mother died in an Orthodox Jewish hospital, the fact that we had arrived 72 hours after she passed away was a problem, because normally Jewish
Yeah.
tradition would be to be buried pretty quickly. Um, and then when I explained to one of the hospital staff that her wishes were to be cremated, it was a real problem. We had a massive ordeal trying to get that arranged and done. And in the end, I mean, I won't go into the full story, but in the end, we managed to arrange through the consulate and the embassy to have my mother cremated in Jerusalem. Well, not in Jerusalem, just north near Tel Aviv, actually.
Yeah.
Um, and then collect her ashes from somebody in a public place. Um, and we literally got given a plastic bag, a Ziploc bag with her ashes in to take home.
Is it that
Um,
unusual over there?
yeah, really unusual. Yeah, yeah. Um, and in fact, there's an interesting BBC article about the last time one of the crematoriums there's two crematoriums in Israel that are known, and on one occasion prior to these two emerging, the address of one of the crematoriums was released and firebombed by religious zealots. There's a BBC article online about it. So it is a big deal. But you can imagine us going back into Tel Aviv International Airport to get the flight back to London with a bag of white powder in a Ziploc carrier
Yeah.
bag. we,
Yeah.
we, you know, I, it was a really tricky thing and quite unsettling. But it was all okay, and we were looked after wonderfully by people in Jerusalem and friends of my mother, and had an amazing memorial service where we had a Jewish rabbis, a Catholic priest, Anglican priest, brothers and sisters from local monastic communities all gather around to say words about my mother and to
Yeah.
share their thanks. So it was a wonderful joy, and I shared a Shabbat meal with a Jewish family, one of whom was a Holocaust survivor who was just wonderfully welcoming to me and to Ruth while we were over there. So so there's a lot to give thanks for. Yeah.
I'm just turning you up a bit. Hopefully it's not an echo. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Um, Yeah, I can imagine what it'd be like coming back, and just quite bizarre, really. All of that in the space of what, 18 months?
No, it's just crazy, crazy. Yeah, yeah.
And now
So,
this,
and now this. Yeah,
and now this. So all everything, and now, right, okay, we're going to take 3 months off now. And
yeah.
uh,
Going back to that question, I've got a question for you, Steve, if that's okay.
please.
Just going back to that in question of inclusion and integration, I heard from a friend the other day, as he put it really, really well. I think this was in the context of racism, but there's a difference between welcome, inclusion, and integration. That we can welcome someone that's different to us. In principle, we say, "Yeah, you're the same as me. We're equal. I love you as a brother and sister." There's inclusion where you feel that you're incorporated, but there are some conditions around you being welcomed into a community. And then there's integration where you feel you're a central part of the formation and life of community.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, from a perspective of someone who is very aware on a daily basis of welcome and inclusion and integration from a disability angle. How does that feel to you? Do you see those things being played out when people welcome you, how they are around you, what they say to you, and how easy it is for you to do things in community?
I I I think it's more how we see our own lives as to how we show up. If you think you're not going to be included, you certainly won't be, because
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the signs of that. I live in a world that most people aren't disabled. I live in a world where most people can walk, can use stairs. I I don't know if this is right, but this is just the way I feel.
Mm.
You cannot adapt the world for every individual, because it won't fit, and you have to at some point have have it fit the majority within the constraints of trying to make it inclusive as possible. So if we were to suddenly have a world where every place is adapted for the disabled, every place is perfectly inclusive of every eventuality, what crops up is nothing, and at some point nothing becomes special then, I suppose, in one respect. But
Yeah.
if I go in town and I cannot get into a restaurant, I'm not overly that bothered.
Yeah.
And it comes down to my expectations. When I make meetings with people and all that, and I turn up, and sometimes they'll take a double take, and I'm like, oh, what? And then I remember I'm in a wheelchair. It comes down to our expectations. And I think we should expect reasonable measures. Whether it's disabled, whether it's a culture, whether it's race or whatever, when we go to a different country, we should expect reasonable measures to fit in. But we cannot expect that other country to bend over backwards and change the way they do things purely to be completely level playing field for everybody. We have to have differences. That's what makes things so beautiful.
Yeah.
Do we get rid of all the colour in the world to fit the people that are colourblind?
That doesn't surprise me to hear you say that, because that's a reflection of your understanding of deal with yourself. Be right with yourself,
Yeah.
and that will in itself change the world around you. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing. So that's really helpful. I appreciate you answering that question. I didn't ask permission to ask, did I? I just asked
No,
it.
no,
So
no. You can ask me any questions. I don't mind answering any.
yeah.
I've been
Well, that's
asked.
very good of you.
I've been on Tinder. I've been asked the most weirdest questions. You can imagine. You can imagine. Yeah. Can you have sex? It's the third question always asked. We live in a wonderful world of complete transparency or no transparency. There seems to be no balance sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
I do love people's curiosity and yeah, absolutely. It's not about, we shouldn't adapt so much to live in a world that shouldn't be somewhat accommodating. But don't expect the world to lay down for you and your whims and your expectations, because it won't. You know, I learned at 4 years old life wasn't fair. I wanted to go to the local garage 3 miles up the road. I was 4 years old. I wanted a Smurf. And my mum was the most unreasonable, horrible, not loving person in the world telling me no.
Yeah, yeah,
I was 4 years old.
yeah.
You know, the world's not fair.
No, no, that's right.
You know, but then when you look at it from another perspective, sometimes it's as fair as it can be. You know, complete equality it's never going to be. You just got to look at nature for that. There's no, we look at nature and we think it's a wonderful balance of equality. It really isn't. It's quite awful. You know, we've got worms that get injected and they're paralyzed in the ground by the insects that eat it, but they don't kill it. They paralyze it to allow it to keep growing, to keep it alive so it can feed them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, nature isn't, you know, there's nothing fair in that.
That touches a deep theological question, Steve. I don't know whether we want to go there, but I could chuck it into the mix if you want.
Please.
So one of the problems that Christians have is that you've hit the nail on the head with this, because in creation there is violence going on around us all the time, and how therefore can we as Christians believe in a God who is all loving and good and created all that we see around us and said that it was good, and yet would allow such violence to go on within creation, within the created order? Even if you just remove human free will, you know, to one side, there's so much that goes on in terms of violence in creation, as you just described. That's a big theological discussion.
I thought you were going to give me the answer.
There are a bunch of answers out there. I mean, interestingly, just from a Christian perspective, of course, the Christian believes them to be saved and free of sin and death by the sacrifice of Jesus. And that in itself was an act of violence. So there is something within the roots of the Christian faith that's reflected in creation as well. That in the way it is at the moment, it's broken and requires sacrifice, but one day it won't need those things. That's what the Christian believes. So the cross is an example of how violence is even necessary for our own salvation. But again, Christians believe that God took on that violence upon himself. That's a theological discussion.
Yeah, I would love to have this discussion. Perhaps we'll carry on this next time. There's a few questions that I would like to answer, or I'd like to ask. Projecting there, I'll probably answer myself really. But we'll leave them to next time. And as you've gone there, we'll go there next time a bit into religion and how does it fit into today. And, you know, I've read The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. I've read the Bible. I went through my, how had to get rid of all religion days. And I've kind of, I don't think gone full circle, but I'm more get rid of the but and put and, you know, include it. You know, I'm very much now that if a lot of the world feel that way, then there must be something there.
Yeah.
You know, even if I disagree with 90% of them, if 10 people are pointing at something and saying, look, we feel something's there, it would be my complete ignorance and arrogance to dismiss it. So I'm very much, I don't think I was ever an atheist. Because
No, I mean, atheism is frightening, isn't it? In the sense that for there to be nothing, there is also no meaning.
There's a really big question with that goes with it's what's more frightening, to know we're not alone or to know we are alone in the universe? What if the Earth, which is probably highly unlikely, given the time and the numbers and the possibilities, but what if we are the only life in the whole universe that has evolved conscious thought awareness? That's like a terrifying question to me. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But then what if it's everywhere?
Yeah, well, that's it.
Is
that more frightening? I don't know.
I know, but it's really what frightens us more. Which one of those two things?
Well, the thing that frightens me the most is if you accept in your heart that there is no reason why we're here, then there is no meaning to life, and that's frightening. It would mean that you could do anything you wanted, and it wouldn't actually matter, wouldn't make a difference. The heat death of the universe, when everything comes to an end, nothing will be remembered. That's horrible. Horrible. So I can't get to a place where I can imagine there being no reason why we're here. You know, why, because you know there is just as much. If you're in that kind of mindset, you know, why is there something rather than nothing? You know, why is what we see around us in the first place?
Yeah.
And the idea of time as well. Time is traveling somewhere. Where's it going to? There's got to be, you know, an end game somewhere. So atheism really baffles me. I find it very difficult to grasp
It's
why you would end up there.
see, from a Zen perspective, and bearing in mind, Zen is full of paradoxes, which clearly don't work. But that's the whole. I think that's the whole point of deconstructing the identity. Because we find it difficult to think that being here would have no meaning, doesn't mean it has to have meaning. And perhaps the meaning.
I mean, that's it. Yeah, you've got to accept if there doesn't necessarily mean it has to have meaning. I'm just saying that if it doesn't have meaning, that's pretty scary.
Yes, and I found out that with my daughter one day. We were up in the front room, and I just discovered Zen. And I was reading Zen books and all that, and emptiness, and go-below meditation and emptiness. And I was up there having a discussion with her about 5 years ago. And I just looked up and said, well, below the ego, there's nothing. We are nothing. We are this, that, and the other. And she looked at me and was like, yeah, I don't get it. I'm saying, it's really simple. It's this, that, and the other. And she goes, that's terrifying. That's really terrifying. And that really struck me as don't go teaching something you don't deeply understand on one hand, and that you're living and understanding it and being able to, you know, if you're gonna hit someone with some teaching, at least be able to pick up the pieces if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And secondly, what good would that do if there is? So it's that balance, isn't it? You know, put meaning on it. Find meaning in your actions and purpose, but don't become too attached to it. That and the example I absolutely love, and Engo gave it to me in America, a priest in America. He said it's like playing the drums. Don't hold them too tight that the music is rigid and no one will enjoy it. And don't hold them too loose that they fall on the floor. Allow whatever feels true to you at the time and allow the music to flow through.
That's really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
I love that image. It's that balance. And I think that's where I am with God now. I'm no longer arguing that he doesn't exist because, like I knew, and I'm no longer arguing that he does exist, like I knew. So I can share my truth, and hello, I can share my truth, and please everybody hold it so lightly that they find theirs. So yeah, we could carry on this same conversation if you're up for it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I love it, Steve. I love talking to you. It's great. It's really good.
Yeah, we'll keep doing this.
Conversations.
And maybe we'll get it out in Victoria Gardens or something like that one day in the next.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
1 meter plus, apparently.
It's got to be 1 meter plus. That's right.
Yeah, not 2 meters anymore. It's got to be 1 meter plus, which to me sounds like another one of those lines on the Tinder app. 1 meter plus.
I don't know what you mean.
I have no idea anymore. It's late in the day. Thank you, Jeremy. Deep gratitude.
Right. Yeah, thanks for the chat. It's been good. It's been good.
My mic's falling over. Thank you. Right. I just work out how did I go live in the end? Take care, guys, and thank you. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.